Hello, everyone. I'm Janet Tarantino, the host of Exploring Everything Spiritual and the author of the book Dying to See Revelations About God, Jesus, Our Pathways, and the Nature of the Soul. Welcome to my program where we dive deep into life's biggest questions and explore the mysteries of existence, consciousness, and the beyond. If you're new here, I'm so glad you found us. This is a space where open minds and curious hearts come together to expand, question, and grow. For those of you returning, thank you for being a part of this amazing community. Your interest, your insights, and energy are what keep these conversations alive. Today, we have something truly special for you. So whether you've been with us from the start or you're just beginning your journey, get ready to explore new perspectives, challenge old beliefs, and maybe even discover something that changes your life. Now let's dive in. But first of all, contemplate this question. What if everything you thought you knew about life, death, and even God was completely wrong? Today, on Exploring Everything Spiritual, I'm honored to welcome Nanci Danison, who holds college degrees in biology, chemistry, psychology, and is a retired top attorney who turned spiritual author when she had a series of verified profound near-death experiences, also known as NDEs, that didn't just change her life, it shattered her understanding of reality itself. These weren't ordinary NDEs. Nanci went into the beyond, into what she calls the deep afterlife experience, where she encountered Source in its purest form. She found herself in light being council meetings and two separate afterlife visits. She had two pop-in NDEs where she returned to the afterlife for a particular purpose, and a shared death experience via an empathic NDE. She also experienced an extraordinary life review, not just through her own eyes, but through the hearts and minds of others. What she brought back challenges everything that we've been taught about the soul, God, and what it means to be human. Nanci discovered that we are not separate from Source, and she will also share mind-blowing insights about the nature of the universe and our soul's mission. And who knows, maybe even what's coming for humanity. Get ready, this conversation you'll never forget. Welcome, Nanci. I'm so excited you're here today.
Thank you, Janet. You made me cry a little bit with your introduction. That was very kind. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, your afterlife experience has been on a great many programs. For instance, it was filmed for the TV show I Survived Beyond and Back. You've been on Coast to Coast AM radio. You've been featured on Shirley MacLaine's podcast, and that's just to name a few. With that being said, I'm sure everyone is now anxious to hear what happened to you. Can you take us to where everything started?
It was March 14th, 1994, and I died. I didn't know that I died, neither did anybody else, because life simply continued. I was in a cancer, one of the five largest, most prestigious cancer hospitals for what's called a needle localization procedure. Mammograms had disclosed irregular patterns of calcifications. And ladies, I want you to know, you need to have a mammogram because those calcifications only show up on mammograms. And that's how both of my cancers were discovered. The needle localization procedure is done by a radiologist. So I was in the mammography room and she gave me a local anesthetic to the skin and then stuck this like large bore needle with a wire inside of it into my breast to try to mark where the tumor is because there was no lump. She was trying to get it into the center of 3 lesions, and we had to go through the whole process twice. Turns out I'm allergic to local anesthetic. I also had very low blood sugar. So when the radiologist and the radiology technician left the room to get the last set of films out of 8 developed, I left too. I was sitting there in a chair with my arms on the arms of the chair with this wire sticking out of my breast, and I had a hospital gown on. And all of a sudden I whooshed, out of my body at about the level of the waist. And I'm standing in front of her saying, wow, I didn't know you could do that. I then went into a comfortable darkness, and I saw a pinpoint of light in the distance. And I said to myself, oh, I know what this is. I'm supposed to go into the light. And the whole experience was familiar to me. Like I couldn't predict what was going to happen next, but I realized I had been through it many, many times. So I went into the light. Well, actually, it went into me. It just came at me and flooded me with this wonderful unconditional love, which I kind of expected, but I didn't expect was the unconditional acceptance of everything I'd ever done without judgment. And so the light like went through me and back out, and I was projecting it back to where it came from. I was in the light by myself for quite a while. There was nobody else there. There was nothing to see. There was nothing to do. There was nothing to feel or hear. But I started getting these huge downloads of what I call knowings. And other deep afterlife experiencers call them knowings too. Knowings are different from being told something or learning something on your own. It's when source's knowledge is deposited whole into your mind, complete with total understanding, and the sense that you had experienced it personally, firsthand. In short, you just knew. So I started getting knowings on a bunch of different things. I was trying to figure out what happened to me because I knew I was, I was alive and awake and aware, and I felt great. Didn't have any pain anymore, but I was in this light, and I was trying to make a medical diagnosis. But then these knowings kept coming, and I also experienced various spiritual powers that I'd never had before. But the knowings covered, it seems like it was just about everything I'd ever wondered about in life and hadn't really gotten the answer to. Some of it was the fact that there's no time except in human life. Humans are the only creatures that mark time. I got information about mental illness and how medical professionals completely misunderstand it. Got information about humans and the fact that human animals are completely separate from what I was. I'm a spiritual being, a spiritual entity. And, at this point, I didn't know I was dead. So I didn't have any reason to even think about that. But I got this huge download of comparisons between what human animals are like, their innate character traits, their innate personality traits, and the fact that they are really not much different from cows and pigs and horses. What we think of as ourselves, what we think of as a human being, is actually the soul inside the body. So all the character traits that you know to be you, everything that you recognize as your personality, that's all soul. That's given to us by source, and it's consistent from incarnation to incarnation to incarnation. It's always the same. And depends on what our body's like, how well we're able to express our true self through a particular body or thing, if we're inside a thing. In the course of getting these knowings and trying to figure out, what had happened to me, I happened to look down and I saw Nanci sitting in this chair in the mammography room. And I went, I know I'm in the light, and I can see that she's down there. And that was the first inkling I got that I might have died. And I went, nah, I couldn't die. I always heard that before you die, you go through a tunnel into the light. And I'm already in the light. And I didn't go through any tunnel. Boom, I'm in a tunnel. And it's not this beautiful, colorful tunnel of light with loved ones, standing around and stars in the distance and beautiful music. I get dirt. I get a dirt floor, stone and dirt walls. It's like a railroad trestle tunnel. I could smell the the muck, I could hear the buzzing of the insects. I could feel the humidity on my skin. It was completely real. And I went through 2 more experiments like that, where what I was told, I manifested physical reality exactly the same as I'd been doing it while I was inside Nanci, exactly the same way we all do it when we're in physical life. And that's why there was no difference between what I experienced by manifesting in the afterlife and what I experienced in Nanci's body, except that while I was in the afterlife, I wasn't fooled. I wasn't fooled into thinking it was real because I knew I was in the light. And that kind of, I don't know whether it was the realization that I had died or what, but that just kind of opened things up for me. And all of a sudden I saw 5 lights in the distance. And I say to myself, this is a typical Danison moment. I'm supposed to go into the light and I get 5 of them and I got to pick the right one. And a voice, not my own, came into my mind and said, it doesn't matter, just pick one. And then the 5 lights turned into 5 beings. In my mind, I was calling them energy beings. I think other people call them light beings. And they were my deepest, most beloved, dearest, eternal friends. And when I saw them, I felt, I'm home. These are my people. It was the first time in my life as Nanci that I ever felt like I truly belonged. And they welcomed me. And they said, well, we ran ahead of the rest of us because we couldn't wait any longer to welcome you home. And I knew from that and other things that they were sending me telepathically that the rest of us meant what humans call God. And I now call source because it's the source of everything. So with them, I was finally home. And I gotta take a second here. Started to have a life review. And in the life review, I saw not only events, like you see events on a movie screen, but I felt everything. And in my life review was every single moment of Nanci's life. Every sky, every thought, every hope, every dream, every feeling, everything. And while that was going on, one of my 5 dear friends was inside, my life review was kind of like on a bubble. I mean, he was inside the bubble with me. And the other 4 were watching my life and popping into scenes from it and living those scenes. And they were either living the scene as me or they were living it as themselves in the scene. And I thought that was the strangest thing. But I really only started, the beginning of the life review with them before I realized I was getting back memories of all my other lifetimes. And I remembered hundreds and hundreds, maybe thousands of other physical lifetimes I had lived throughout the universe. I had been all kinds of things, all kinds of creatures, things. My favorite other lifetime was I was a nebula. And I remembered being a nebula. And as the nebula, it's kind of like gaseous and spread out. I could feel all the little spread out particles. They were me. I was in all of them. I could feel the space in between the particles. I could see the beauty of the universe. I could see the beauty of myself as a nebula. I was completely aware and conscious. And it was just exquisite. And I remembered all kinds of other lifetimes. And they were far more interesting than Nanci's life. So I paid attention to them, and I stopped paying attention to Nanci's life. After the life review, I started getting more knowings. And I thought to myself, oh, I better ask the important questions while I've got the chance, because I don't know how long I'm going to be here. So I asked, what is God? What am I? What's the purpose of life? Why am I on earth? Where's heaven? Where's hell? And what's the one true religion? And that last one was because I'd been raised as a Catholic, and I was always told that's the one true religion. And I wanted to know for sure. And I got the answers to all those questions in the form of knowings. I mean, it was just deposited into my mind from Source's mind, complete with that sensation that I had lived it personally. And I remembered knowing all that stuff before. I remember knowing it before I incarnated into Nanci. I remembered that it was true. I knew it was true. And I was angry. Janet, I was angry because nobody told me any of that while I was in Nanci's life. You know, I had 12 years of Catholic education and 6 years of Methodist college. And nobody told me any of that stuff before. You know, I'd been brought up on, you know, Jesus and the Father and the Son and the Holy Ghost and Mary and Joseph and, you know, the whole 9 yards. None of that was in the afterlife. And I felt foolish. I felt like I'd been tricked into believing Catholic religion. I was angry because I thought, well, everybody else must know this but me. And what's wrong with me? I mean, did they think I was too stupid to understand it? Did they think I was not able to handle it? You know, I was offended, you know, that I had not been told the truth of what I was living through right there in the afterlife. I think in response to that anger, Source showed me a documentary history of Earth from its creation through its demise. And the focus of the history was the development of religions among humans and how and why they are the way that they are. I think it was an attempt to explain to me, you know, don't be angry with my parents and the nuns and the priests because they were just following what they had been taught, and that humans have nothing to get information from except watching human life and animal life and watching what goes on Earth. And Earth is like, you know, this teeny tiny little speck in the universe. And human life is this teeny tiny little speck among all life throughout the universe. And so their focus was on humans. You know, they didn't know any better. And so it did calm me down. And when I was watching Earth's Future, I saw that because I wondered why nobody had told me these things. I saw that Source had sent at least 1 million messengers among humans to deliver the truth in small bites. And some of those messengers were artists, singers, songwriters, authors, actors, you know, a lot of creative types. None of them were priests, rabbis, ministers, popes, kings, you know, gurus, people who call themselves spiritual leaders. They were all just regular folks, but they were all, when you put all their information together, collectively teaching us that there's only one, there's only Source, and we're part of Source. And that all that really matters in life is love. It doesn't matter what you do. It doesn't matter what you think. What matters is love. So that reassured me quite a bit. Then after that, oh, I'm sorry, I could go on forever.
That's fine. That's fine. Can I ask you about when you went through your life review, did that change how you viewed life? Relationships, love, and conflicts, and
No, because like I said, I didn't pay much attention to it because I was so fascinated by my other lifetimes. Now, I did have a second life review as one of my pop-ins, much, you know, years later. And during that life review, I also saw Nanci's future. But in that one, I was able to be inside everyone else that participated in every event. And I could see the event from their perspective. I could feel their feelings. I could hear their thoughts. I could know the entire context of, that scene and what it meant to them and what it meant to me. And back while I was in the afterlife and had the first life review, one of the things I learned was that the purpose of the life review, when we go into the afterlife after death, is it's a transition point. It helps us to gain the perspective of unconditional love, viewing our own lives, to get out of the human mindset, to get out of the human judgmentalness, and to get out of the ideas of revenge and vengeance and, guilt and everything else, and just see things objectively with unconditional love. And it was also, the purpose is to answer all the questions we had. It's like you have an exchange with, someone, and you wonder, well, why did they do that? Why did they say that? What was behind that? What might have happened if they said something different? Why did I do that? Why did I say that? And it really just brings everything into a broader and broader context.
Can you explain exactly what a pop-in is for those that might not understand it?
I don't know what a pop-in is. I was just, I think, well, the first time I was just meditating, and all of a sudden I was in the afterlife. Like, I didn't die. I didn't go through, the blackness and go into the light and all that. I was just, boom, I was there. So that's why I call it a pop-in. I just popped into the afterlife for no apparent reason. The second one I had while I was writing my book, Backwards Beliefs. And I was just typing along on my kitchen table, and all of a sudden I'm in the afterlife. And while I was there, I got this download of everything that had ever been written by a human, ever. I mean, it included, phone call slips, little kids, homework, notes you put on the refrigerator, operas, plays, literature, everything, absolutely everything. But what was cool about it was, while I was watching all this written material, kind of going across my mental view screen, there were segments highlighted in gold. And if you read all those gold segments, one after the other, what they said was, we are all one.
I kind of wondered if that was what your nebula experience was, because it sounded like you became one with the universe at that time.
No, I was just a nebula. It was just a distinct little nebula. But that message of we are all one, the only writing in there that I remembered after I came back from the afterlife was a song by Nickelback. And I don't remember the song, but there are words in there that, if you look at them the right way, they say, we are all one. And when I was doing that history of, religion on Earth, I saw that one of the million messengers was Gene Roddenberry, who did the original Star Trek series. Mm-hmm. And so I started watching Star Trek with a whole different, attitude about it. I had them all on tape. I'm a big Trekkie. Any other questions about the life review before I go on?
No, that's okay. You can go ahead.
Okay. The next thing that happened after, watching that documentary history was, I and my light being friends started moving. There's no human word for this. I'm going to have to say deeper, farther, further, more into source. And the way I conceptualized source while I was there, the closest I can come to describing it is like the sun, where, sunlight is sun, and you go closer and closer to the sun, it gets warmer and warmer and brighter and brighter. And then there's this gaseous corona, this gas is just flying off of it, sunspots and coronal ejections. But then there's an actual core to the sun, a gaseous core. And then inside that core is the inside of the sun. So source is, the best I can explain it, an energy source like the sun. While we're on Earth, we're like in sunlight. We're in Source's outer edge of energy, not outer edge, but we're farther out than the core. And we can feel love, but it's not very strong. The closer and closer we get to the core of Source, the more and more love we feel. Because, like humans think of a fire putting off heat as energy, and a light bulb that's putting off light as energy, Source puts off love as energy. You know, what we feel when we're inside a human body and know and recognize as love is literally Source energy. So my friends and I were like moving deeper through the coronal layers of Source. And while I was there, I witnessed, rewatched, remembered creation of the universe. I remembered being there and doing that. I remembered thinking about creating a physical matter universe. And because I wanted to experience that. Source is an extremely curious and creative, whatever it is. And I wanted to know what it was like to have other experiences, like a little baby play, like a playpen playing with the mirrors and the mobile. They want to explore, and they explore their fingers and their toes. That's what Source was doing. It was exploring its powers and its nature. And so I decided to create this physical matter universe. And so I, Source, concentrated, focused my attention and intention, and formed this huge ball of energy, kind of like what you must call the Big Bang. Mm-hmm. Except that Big Bang took place in Source's mind. So nothing in the universe ever left Source's mind. It's just a thought. It's a huge creative thought. And Source did not create like planets and stars and yada yada. It just sent the energy out within its own mind and let it evolve on its own. Source set these rules or protocols for how energy and matter would behave, and then just let it go. So I watched that for quite a while. I saw Earth's creation and its future, and I was hanging around outside the solar system, watching the solar system, and I learned a bunch of things about creation and life in general. And at the end of that, watching creation, it was obvious to me that I was Source, because I remembered being Source. This is going to make me cry again. And for the first time in Nanci's life, I realized I'd never been alone. I'd never been unloved. I'd never been cast adrift and made to earn my way back to heaven. I'd never been held accountable for all the things that my body had done. I did it all to myself. And that blew me away. And the love in that, it would literally blow a human apart, just the force of that love. And the whole time, like ever since the beginning of watching that video of Earth history, through this point, I kept saying in the back of my mind, somebody ought to tell those people. If somebody ought to tell those people down on Earth, I meant. And the next thing I know, I'm whirling back toward Nanci's body, saying, I didn't mean me. I did not want to do this. And so when I realized I was on my way back, I started memorizing as much as I could of what I'd learned and what I experienced. And it was kind of hard because my light being friends were kind of like out here somewhere saying, love is all that matters. Love is all that truly matters. And they were chanting it. And I was saying, shut up. I'm trying to remember the stuff. So I finally, got back into my body and the radiologist and radiology technician eventually realized I'd been gone, because I told them, I passed out. And the rest is kind of history. I was dead for, as best the medical records indicate, about a half an hour. So that was my big experience. That's what generated 5 of my books.
Mm-hmm.
It's just what happened to me and the information I learned there. My books are not autobiographies in there. This is what I was like when I was a kid. There's none of that in there. It's just straight from the afterlife. And I only write my memories from the afterlife. And if I don't remember something, I just say I don't remember. I don't interpret. I don't extrapolate. I don't come up with my own conclusions or ideas about anything. It's just data. And it kind of reads like that.
Yeah. Kind of like an attorney, huh?
Very much like an attorney, except that I'm not arguing a point. I'm not trying to,
Mm-hmm.
prove something.
Mm-hmm.
My second afterlife experience was also my first council meeting. I'd been back in Nanci's body for maybe a couple months, and all of a sudden I'm back in the afterlife. And at this time, I was like appearing before I call it a council. It was a gathering of light beings. As an attorney, I kind of recognize it as a tribunal. So if people call it that, or feel like they're judges or something, that makes sense to me, because that's kind of the presentation that they gave. And I don't know why I died, and I don't know. Well, I do know why I was there. I was there because they had volunteered to monitor my mission of telling everybody down there, and basically what they said to me was, "You're not performing your mission. Get with the program." And I felt a little bit like I'd been smacked up the side of the head, because they were right. I hadn't been doing anything to perform my mission. And I still didn't do it for a number of years after that. But it wasn't until many years later that I had the second council meeting. And I had been writing, I at least had been writing down my memories from the afterlife. So had started my mission to that extent. And I started telling a few people. I think by this time I might have joined IANS. But by and large, I wasn't really working my mission that aggressively. And I had taken a medication that stripped my body of sodium. And so I was suffering from low blood sodium, which can be fatal. And I went back to the afterlife. And I was back before a council. That was different light beings. And it was a different setting. It was more like, it wasn't a solid looking, it was like this vague, like a dreamscape conference room table with chairs around it. And these light beings were coming in one by one, joining the conference. And I was there watching them come in and thinking, oh, this must be an emergency. They're not even ready for me. And all of a sudden, 2 light beings came in. They had the faces of my mother, of Nanci's mother and father. And I was, oh gosh, I hadn't seen them for decades. My father died when I was 17. So it was just so wonderful to see them. And then those faces were gone, and they just, blended in with the rest of the light beings. But that worried me, because I thought, holy cow, if I'd known that Nanci's parents were going to be on my council someday, I would have treated them with a whole lot more respect. Then the last person to come in was Jeff, a human that I knew. And he came in a human body and put one haunch on the edge of the table and looked down at me and whispered, surprise. And I was surprised. Because Jeff, what's Jeff doing in my afterlife, in my council meeting? And the purpose of this meeting was basically the council told me that Nanci had died, or was dying. It was questionable that she could be resuscitated. And I had to choose. Did I want to stay home, even though I hadn't completed my mission? And it wouldn't be held against me that I hadn't, done much on my mission. Or I could go back and join Nanci. If I went back and joined Nanci, we would suffer for the rest of her life. And, I thought about it and thought about it. And I thought, Source gives you ambition, you do it, I wasn't going to fail. And I was also like curious about what was going to happen because I'd seen the future and I wanted to see if that's what was going to happen. And I felt guilty for leaving Nanci on her own. And I really wanted to tell those people down there, what I'd learned and what the afterlife was really like. I felt a responsibility to do that. So I said, send me back. And sure enough, we've suffered from that day forward. Probably more through my own manifestations than anything else.
Yeah. Did both of the council meetings were they in like a similar area? Because the second one sounded like it was in more of a an office area or court area.
There's no areas. There's no physical matter in the afterlife.
No physical matter.
None at all. So there's no way to say it was in an area or in a place.
Okay, so it wasn't in a particular atmosphere like the whiteness or anything like that?
No. Okay. When a soul sees earth-like scenery in the afterlife, they've manifested it.
Mm-hmm.
Or the light beings, like at a council meeting, those light beings can manifest scenery because it freaks you out to know you died.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. So they do what they can to reassure you, and one of the ways to reassure you is to show you this earth-like setting.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. Right. Thank you. Okay,
and then do you want to hear about my 3 near-death experiences?
Please continue.
Okay. After that second council meeting, I got back in my body. I realized, well, I had been told Nanci's dying. So I called 911 and I went to the kitchen to get some water. And on my way back, I projectile vomited all over the dining room floor. I mean, like 10 feet of projectile vomit. And only a woman would do this. I thought, oh my gosh, that's going to eat through the coating on the floor. I better clean it up. So I mopped that up. And then I changed clothes. And then the paramedics came and took me to the hospital. I was admitted, and I was in the hospital for 3 days. But when they first took me into the emergency room, I knew I was getting out of body again. I was telling the ER physician, I'm having a hard time staying in the body. I can barely talk. And he said, oh, you're doing fine. Not, oh, you think you're dying? Maybe we should do something about that. Oh, no, you're doing fine. And so I told him what had happened. He scheduled an MRI. And so they put me on a gurney and they had me on IVs, blah, 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 and wheeled me down to the MRI room. Well, I had to wait in line. So I was on a gurney laying out in the hallway. And all of a sudden, I sat up out of the body. So Nanci was laying down flat. I was sitting up from the waist, looking around. And I could see my ER doctor through the corner of 2 walls in another hallway, running toward me. And he eventually got right beside me. And I thought, oh, I better get back in. And he hooked up another IV and he said, I figured out what's wrong with you. Your blood sodium is dangerously low. I think mine was 118 and like 115 is dead or something. It was just really, really low. So that was my first in-hospital NDE. And I was with a doctor. He didn't know I was sitting up out of my body, but he was there. The second one was during my, I was diagnosed with stage 3 metastatic breast cancer in 2011. And so that my second in-hospital NDE was during the first round of surgeries. I had, I guess it would be in the nature of a lumpectomy. It was called an excisional biopsy. And I had sentinel node, lymph node removal. And during that surgery, I realized I was standing outside the OR, looking around and looking through the window into the OR. And I saw this body in there, and I went, oh, I'm supposed to be in there. So I jumped back into the body. So I was surrounded by doctors, well, at least one doctor and nurses. So they were in attendance at that NDE, but they didn't know I was out. My third one was during my second round of surgery for breast cancer in 2011. And the anesthesiologist came to see me the next day to tell me what happened. But I already knew, because during that surgery, I knew I died. I got out, and I was standing there I was standing up in the air, like kind of hovering over, not really at the ceiling, but hovering over. And I was watching the surgery. And I heard the anesthesiologist say, wow, that's a beautiful incision. And, I don't know if you know this, but when they remove a breast, at least when they do a radical mastectomy like I had, you have a big scar. Mine was 9 inches long. And there's usually this pooch at the end, because there's more skin than there is material, to fill it out. And the anesthesiologist was impressed with how small my pooch was. And she was also impressed because I'm allergic to sutures. So they had to glue it. They had to glue my suture, my incision closed. I did a really, really good job. So anyway, the next morning, the anesthesiologist came to see me, and she said, well, I came to tell you that you are not a candidate for surgery ever again. And I said, yeah, I know. And she said, you bradyed down during the surgery, which is doctor speak for your heart is beating so slow that I had to resuscitate you. She said, I had to resuscitate you. And I said, I know. And I said, I watched the surgery. I was out of body watching the surgery for a while. I said, and I heard somebody say, wow, that's a beautiful incision. She goes, I said that. I said, yeah, I know you did. I heard you. I saw you say that. So she verified, that at least that I was out. I had to be out in order to hear that. Mm-hmm. And I haven't had surgery since then.
Well, that's good news. I mean, as long as
I was supposed to have surgery. I broke my shoulder a few months ago, and it should have been surgically repaired, but it couldn't be. So I have the shoulders in 3 pieces. The big bone with the top is in 3 pieces still.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Is there anything else you'd like to share, Nanci?
I'd like to tell you about my new book.
Yeah, please do.
Oh, shoot. Well, it's this one over here.
Yeah, hold it up for us.
Oops.
Oh, 33 souls
who met God. Accounts of atheists, Buddhists, and Christians who died and met the same God. My whole life since 1994, when I had my first afterlife experience, I've been reading NDEs. I read every book that came out, every research book, every research paper, I watched the Daniel Brinkley TV show. That's when I first found out that I'd had a near-death experience. That was in 1995, not about a year and a half after I died. And I loved that because I went, I'm not crazy. It actually happened, because my oncologist was telling me I was crazy, or that I hallucinated. So I kept thinking, if there's one, there has to be more. And so I kept reading and kept trying to find other people who had gone through everything that I went through and literally realized they were source, woke up to the knowledge that they were source and that they had created all this, and that, none of what they'd learned during religious training was what actually happens in the afterlife. And I looked and I looked, and finally I found one guy. I thought, oh, if there's one more, there's got to be two more. So about, oh, I don't know how many years ago, I asked my readers to let me know if they were aware of any NDE stories like mine. And so they started sending them to me, and I found a third one. So then I started doing, well, I read Dr. Jeffrey Long's book
Mm-hmm.
about God, about his God study. And I thought, well, I could do that. I can read the NDEs on nderf.org. So I started doing that, and I read 13, 1500. And I knew I'd read like hundreds and hundreds before that, over the course of 30 years. But this was like a really concentrated effort to get 2,000 NDEs and then study them. I wanted to get 5,000, but it was taking way too long. So I got my 2,000, and out of that 2,000, I found 32 other souls who met God. And I studied their accounts in great detail. I made this chart of 43 different elements. And some of them were, the typical NDE elements of, going into a dark void, going into the light, seeing family members, yada, yada, yada. And I compared them all on all the 43 elements. What I wanted to do was find out why. Why did some people have what I call an expanded afterlife experience like I did? And why didn't everybody else? What made the difference? What was the turning point? Because 33 out of 2,000 is only 1.5%.
Mm-hmm.
I never did find out, why some people have the expanded version. But NDE research, has, depending on which doctor you read, has a number of elements. Like I think Raymond Moody, who defined the category of medical event, has 15 elements. And then, over the years, some other doctors have added to them, but they always included this element that the soul reached a barrier or a boundary or a being told them they had to go back, but they were always sent back before they got very far into the afterlife. The farthest any of them had ever gotten was the life review. I wanted to know why, and although I didn't find that out, I did find that there were 33 of us who got past that point. There's no barrier, no boundary, no being telling us we had to go back. Now, every one of us eventually came back into the body, or we wouldn't have, a story to tell. Mm-hmm. And some of them were told, it wasn't your time. But all the events that led to our returning to the body occurred after we merged into Source, after we became aware that we are all Source collectively.
Absolutely.
And that's what makes the difference between, my book, 33 Souls, and other NDE stories, because these are the folks who personally went past that boundary point, that barrier point.
The barrier. Mm-hmm. Well, that'll be fascinating. It's already out, correct?
It was published today, or maybe tomorrow. I think I've had it out on pre-order on Amazon.
Yeah, I saw it.
Pre-order on my website. But it's, I wrote it. It took me 3 years to write. So, I don't remember everything that I wrote because, it's over the course of 3 years. But when I read it now, it just, it just takes my breath away. Mm-hmm. Because what I did is I used the words of the experiencers to describe things, mm-hmm. instead of, converting it into my own words. And so
I would imagine you're probably pretty empathic now, correct? So you're probably
I always was.
Yeah. So you're probably reliving their experiences through their words.
Yes, and that's how I got this cover. I gave a friend of mine who is just a really good graphic designer the descriptions that the 33 souls had made. And although they were all different, they all had the same flavor. And so this is what my designer came up with, this graphic here on this. And the minute I saw it, I burst into tears. I said, yeah, that's it.
Perfect. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. Oh, I encourage everybody to go out and get a copy of her book, because they say, I believe it was the near-death INs or NDERF said that the more you read these stories, if you haven't had a near-death experience, you understand and you kind of go through a transformation yourself. So if you want to experience what NDEers experience, it's a great way to possibly manifest what everybody, the NDEers are experiencing.
Maybe a teeny little taste of it.
I think Raymond Moody called it not a disease, but it was catchy. He called it catchy. So, well, anyway, everybody's going to have their own experience anyway. So, but I encourage people to go out and grab a copy of it, because I plan on doing that. So,
thank you.
Yeah.
Well, the one thing that reading NDE stories and listening to them does, I think, is if something resonates with you, it helps you wake up, because most souls truly and deeply believe that they are human. And because of that, they don't use the spiritual powers that we have. And that's a shame, because there's so much we could be doing. We could make ourselves so much happier, make our lives so much richer. We could do so much for the planet if we would just wake up so that we could use our spiritual powers. And I think NDEers help us do that.
Okay. And what are you referring to as our spiritual powers?
First is unconditional love. Humans are incapable of unconditional love. Biology and the survival instinct just mandates that when a human loves, there's something in it for them. You know, it's either parental love, which is imprinting, or sexual love, which is hormonal. But unconditional love is one of them. Another one is manifesting, the ability to literally create physical matter, the physical reality of the life your body is leading. We do that unconsciously all the time. We unconsciously manifest into physical matter, into physical reality, what we souls truly and deeply believe. And most of those beliefs are from human life. They're things that we picked up from the time we were in the womb, to the present day, beliefs that we have formed based on what we've seen and what we've heard. And a lot of them are just wrong. I mean, they're wrong in a harmful way. Like, a very small child may, because of something it hears, decide it wasn't wanted. He wasn't wanted by his parents. She wasn't wanted. She was a mistake. And carry that guilt and that hurt through an entire lifetime, and manifest an entire lifetime to prove they're not worthy of being here because they weren't wanted. And that it's not even true. Probably what they heard was not how the parents really felt. Yes. It was just, and we souls, we can't take a joke. We don't know the difference between a joke and what's real. And so a lot of our beliefs are based on snatches of conversation or things that we turned into beliefs that were just offhand remarks.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we can dig out those beliefs and change them, we will change what we unconsciously manifest, change our whole life.
Right.
But in addition to that, we can consciously manifest things into our life.
Mm-hmm.
So I've spent a lot of time helping people do that. Another one is we can access universal knowledge, what I call universal knowledge, sources knowledge. We don't get the knowings, downloads, like you can in the afterlife. That only happens in the afterlife. But we can get little bits and pieces, maybe a few words, maybe a sentence or two. And it can be anything from, practical, useful information to spiritual information. Like when I'm stuck on something, I've used our ability to access universal knowledge to get things like answers to bookkeeping questions. Just anything. I just say, source somebody in there knows, where I'm supposed to debit this and where I'm supposed to credit that, and then I get the answer. Just manifesting, not access spiritual knowledge. The ability to hold multiple simultaneous levels of awareness. That's something else we can only do in the afterlife. But in human life, we can try to get our perspective shifted around to see things from the other person's point of view. You've heard the phrase, walk a mile in my shoes. Mm-hmm. It's the ability to walk a mile in someone else's shoes, to see things from their viewpoint so that you're not locked into the self-centered way of looking at things. And it really helps us understand other people and helps us get along better with other people if we can understand, where they're coming from. And we do that by having multiple simultaneous levels of awareness. I'm trying to think what the fifth one is. Can't think of it right now.
Okay, that's okay. It's fascinating. I mean, all this is helpful to the listeners. So thank you for sharing that. Nanci, your story is riveting, and I'm deeply grateful for you being here today. Before we wrap up, do you have anything special you'd like to leave the listeners with?
Yes. Please read NDE research, not just the stories from the individual souls that have been out of body or gone into the afterlife. Read the research because it's so much more concentrated. It gives you a better picture of things in context, and it'll dispel some erroneous conclusions that you've come to. Like some people think you always go through a tunnel. Well, if you read the research, you'll realize only a small percentage of people go through a tunnel. And the research also gives you proof. They're medical scientists who have collectively, through their research, proven beyond a shadow of a doubt that consciousness survives the death of the body. Personality survives the death of the body. I can't even imagine, if you know anything about NDE research, how you could possibly doubt that there's an afterlife. And what could be more comforting than knowing that you go on? You don't have to worry about, just when you die, it's blackness and you're gone. It's not like that. It is for the body, but not for us. Mm-hmm. So I think having that proof of continuity of existence is worth more than anything. And there's no reason to fear death. Once you read that research and you understand what it means, I think it relieves a heavy burden off of us.
Yeah, the hard part is getting there, but leaving the body is a piece of cake.
Yeah. And I also encourage you to listen to the people who've actually been in the afterlife. Listen to the people who have actually been source and remember being source and remember creating the universe and remember, that we're all one and that we're all source together. There are bazillions of human religions out there and lots of spiritual philosophies, and they're all man-made. They're all created by people who do not have personal knowledge. But these people have personal knowledge. They've been there, done that. And they have sacrificed sometimes their reputation, their careers, their families, their,
yeah, friends,
to come, friends, to come back here and tell us these things. Mm-hmm. And I know in one of the accounts, one of them said, I'm going to try this one more time. When she wrote up her NDERF account, you can just hear how little belief these people have, experienced since they started telling their stories. How how hard it is for them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, maybe the more people share experiences, because they had a study done in, oh, many years ago, and 5% of the population in America had NDEs. And in later on, 10 years later, in Europe, they did another survey, and in Europe, 10% of the people, because people, once they hear these stories, oh, I've had one of those too. That explains what happened to me. So it is opening up the awareness of people around us, and that's important.
Yeah, and one of the premier NDE researchers, Dr. Sam Parnia, wrote in a paper in 2021 that 850 million people worldwide have died and gotten out of body and came back and told us about it.
Mm-hmm.
780 million of them remembered life outside the body in one sense or another.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing else in the world that has that many people verifying it.
Yes. So this is the evolution of understanding.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, outstanding. Thank you for that wisdom that you shared with us today. So, as we wrap up today's episode, I just want to take a moment to thank you, my dear listeners, for being here to listen to these incredible experiences. And whether you are walking, driving, or just sitting quietly with your headphones in, know that your presence means more than you might know. This program, Investigating Everything Spiritual, isn't just a collection of stories, thoughts, or voices. It's a connection between souls. So until next time, be kind to yourself, be kind to others, and remember, your voice, your story, your presence matters. And most of all, love is the highest and best gift we can give to each other. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share, and join us again. Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you, Janet.
Yes, thank you for being here.